Welcome back. Time to take a look at the week that was, and in studio with us for this conversation, Advocate Nelson Harvey. We also have Mutinda Kavemba, who is a political analyst, and last but not least, Ndegwa Njiru, who is a High Court advocate. And a lot happened this week. A lot of excitement earlier in the week with the launch of the first SGR commuter train by President Uhuru Kenyatta, which took place in the coastal region. The president also taking that maiden trip with a host of dignitaries along with him, and a lot of politics surrounding this first commuter train. Harvey, maybe to begin with you, there was a lot of criticism towards the SGR to begin with, but the thing is, it's already here with us. In terms of the impact to the Mwananchi, will it be short-term, whether it be long-term? What are Kenyans to expect from this?
The SGR story is one that invites a divided congregation, and with equal measure of either appreciation or criticism. And I think to a greater extent, the government must be lauded for having ensured that this project was implemented and put to fruition within the shortest period of time, so to speak, within expectation. But I think therein ends the thread of praise. And the criticism upon which the progress for this railway line has been taken must be seen objectively. The SGR has run all the way from Mombasa up to Syokimau without any development on the side. The reason as to why governments always take transport and communication into the hinterland is to enable the development of that area. Now it looks like the SGR has, so to speak, inherited the name of its predecessor, a lunatic. It's actually run without purpose.
Isn't it too soon to start expecting such developments by the SGR? I mean, it was launched two days ago, literally.
No, it's not too soon. If you look at the Lunatic Express, the manner in which the railway line was designed by the British, it was intended to go step by step. So by the time the railway left Mombasa, it reached Mtito Andei, it reached Sultan Ahmud, it reached Nairobi, it eventually went to Port Victoria. It went with the development. It is the railway line that is supposed to take development there, not the other way around. Now, if you look at the towns and settlement areas, administrative areas that were conglomerated within the line of the Lunatic Express, they grew with that pattern. Now, the areas where the SGR has passed has not benefited, and it cannot be said that this is something that will be done in the next 5 or 10 years. It ought to have gone seamlessly. Right. So to that extent, therefore, it may be asked, what is this railway line doing? What is it taking from Mombasa to Nairobi without extreme dispatch? What is it taking from Nairobi to Naivasha? This is a question, if you are to ask the Jubilee administration, they will not be able to give you an answer.
Right. Kavemba, your thoughts on that? First of all, do you agree with Harvey's sentiments in terms of the development that was expected, or at least he would have expected to come along with the SGR, or is it too soon for that? And secondly, in terms of the impact of the SGR short term on the lives of Kenyans, because Kenyans now expect if the cost of transport is cheaper, then the prices of commodities in the shelves will also go down.
Yeah, in the long run. And I think it's too soon for you to talk about issues of development, because the truth of the matter is that the infrastructure, development follows infrastructure. You don't first do development, then bring infrastructure. It's the other way around. And like, for instance, let me give you an example of something else that we've done. Majorly, Isiolo, the Isiolo to Moyale Road. That is one area of Kenya that had not been opened up. You watch in the next 10 years what will happen in that area. Not because of anything, but because of the fact that it has been opened up. Even in terms of security. People used to get to Isiolo and they had to wait for each other so that they have a convoy that has a security at the front, at the back, and at the middle to ensure that they are safe. You couldn't go alone. But now we have tarmac. That means that even in terms of security, that area is going to be much more secure than before. So a lot of opportunities will open up. That is also the same. If you look at the SGR, it has got some terminals, Emali, it has got the Mtito Andei, right. And with time, this flow of human traffic will necessitate some type of development in those areas. And that is how it works, not the other way around. Actually, if you look at Kenya, the major there's a pattern that development in Kenya has followed. Mostly it followed the railway, the one is called the Lunatic, and also the major highways. So the areas that are least developed are those that never got infrastructural development. So it is the infrastructural development that invites development. So it's just a matter of time.
So it's something that is yet to come.
Yes, of course it will come.
It's yet to come. And we're just looking at it objectively, of course. Credit has to be given where it's due. The SGR project really was within the timelines, and it's definitely one of Jubilee parties or the Jubilee government's biggest achievements so far. But then again, as Kenyans and as the media, we've got this habit of questioning things and the manner in which things were done. And the biggest criticism towards the SGR project is that when you compare this with Ethiopia, they have a railway line that's twice the size and cost just as much. And it's a lot more advanced in terms of technology for this. But is this comparison our downfall, or where we go wrong as Kenyans? Or should we just be happy that it's here now and we'll get better with time?
I would start by applauding government for what they've been able to deliver in terms of the SGR. And the biggest lesson that we can learn from it is that if a government can be committed to do bigger things, they can actually deliver. If we can enhance our accountability, this country can even be able to do bigger things. Of course, there are some shortcomings with the issues of the SGR. For instance, there could have been embezzlement here and there. People are still complaining that they have not been compensated fully for their land that was acquired. And those are the loopholes and the lacunas that we need to seal to ensure that once a project is purposed and a budget has been purposed to deliver a particular project, each and every coin ought to be channeled towards delivery of that project. For instance, if you look at the SGR and the question of land acquisition, the National Land Commission is highly questioned on how they went about compensating people. So at the end of the day, Uhuru's government is going to go and get a lot of credit if they're going to follow those guys who are mandated to deliver the SGR, but along the way they diverted some money. So if Uhuru wants to cleanse the process of the SGR, he needs to make sure that the government follows on people like Swazuri, who have been questioned. I have questioned him in Parliament personally. I have petitioned in Parliament in respect to issues of embezzlement of money arising from SGR. So to cramatize the whole process, that aspect of accountability needs to be done. Let us know, this was the budget, this is the amount of the money that was embezzled by so-and-so, and these are the steps that we have taken towards deterring such kind of a habit. Now, the other aspect about the SGR is that SGR is coming to facilitate and to boost the people who are already in production business. If there are 20,000 trucks on the road, now maybe they are going to be lesser. But this SGR will be offloading Mombasa port with the same quantity of containers that have been coming. So the other thing that you must do now to meet the cost on the SGR is to increase the level of production and the gap of production. Let us get, we pump in more people into production, and especially the youths, so that we also have the opportunity of benefiting from the SGR.
Right.
Yes.
And of course, the SGR just being there also give them the opportunity to start businesses in terms of the development that we've been talking about. But then again, this now opens the way for phase 2 of the SGR, which is supposed to go all the way to Naivasha. And this is the most contested one because it is expected to pass right in the middle of the Nairobi National Park. And just like you mentioned, in terms of opening up development, this second phase has been lauded by most people, especially in terms of decongesting the capital city of Nairobi, because many people would now opt to live along those lines. But then environmentalists have, of course, gone to court and grabbed an injunction for this, saying that there's other alternatives for this railway to pass through other than the national park. Harvey, maybe just to come to you in terms of this injunction legally, how will it hold and will it be enough to bar the process or at least force the government to alter their route in the SGR project?
Well, I think the determination with which the government may want to push the SGR agenda indicates that they will want to do everything to ensure that it comes to fruition. And this not necessarily out of malice or anything for that reason, because the power of decision making is not an easy power to exercise. It will be very easy for a court of law to come to a conclusion that, look, this may not be environmentally friendly. This may not be the good thing to do. But I think if I was to look at it from a purely administrative point of view, I'll be a little bit mean. I don't think monkeys and warthogs should take precedence over the affairs of man. And this is not the first time that human beings have done this. The initial railroads that were created in the United States, in the great Europe and in Asia, really interfered with the environment. But I think in the course of creating this transport and communication network, the administration has put up plans to ensure that there's minimum disruption. And I do not foresee a permanent bar coming from the courtrooms in respect of the issue of the railway line passing through Nairobi National Park. I think it will most likely pass through the park.
That's quite a controversial view. Kavemba, even as we get your thoughts on this, a lot of politics came with the SGR as we wind up. And first of all, we had the president addressing the issue of vandalism on the SGR. He took a very tough stance, saying that he would consider capital punishment for these same people, despite the fact that he removed capital punishment. And the criticism coming from the public was, why not see such a stance with other people who loot Mali, our Kenya, which is basically in terms of corruption, money is being stolen every day. And many are saying if he had the same commitment in fighting corruption, maybe we would see quite a change. I mean, are Kenyans being too harsh, or was it in order following the president's remarks?
Yeah, as I chip into that, I would want to say something that you also said initially, that the comparisons between our SGR and that of Nigeria and that of Ethiopia. First, I think it's good for us to be very fair on our governments also, because that didn't just come from nowhere. It was conceptualized as part of Vision 2030. So what we need to ask ourselves is what we got, what we had envisioned in Vision 2030. And from the sentiments of everybody, including the former Prime Minister, it is exactly what they would have done. The only thing he said is that they would have done it with much less money. That is the only thing. But he has not said that it is substandard or we downgraded it from what it should have been. No.
So nobody envisioned a bullet train like Kenyans were expecting.
You know, that's why I want us to be, I have been seeing a lot of that. And there are other things that determine such. Like, for instance, in Ethiopia,
but Kavemba,
the ability to produce power in Ethiopia, for instance, the ability of Ethiopia to produce power is much more above our ability. They are actually, they are even selling power outside, as we are not even self-sufficient. So we wouldn't entrust such key projects on an unreliable supply of power. So we have to do things as per our ability.
With what we have.
So what we have now is what we had envisaged. The integrity issues aside, which I can't ignore, and I want to agree with him that the only thing that probably can be justified is the integrity issues surrounding the implementation of the SGR. But otherwise, we have what we had envisaged to have, and within time. As in, these people have implemented this within their first electoral.
It's credible.
It's credible.
Have you had something to add to that?
Yeah, what I wanted to point out on the part of what my friend has just said, if you look at the clip that was run by Jubilee when they were campaigning to be elected in 2013, they actually projected an image of a bullet train. I mean, that's the reality. And look, if you take
pictorial.
Yeah, pictorial, but I mean, an artist's impression of what a building should be, that's how it should be. If an artist promises you an oval, he cannot come with a box instead. And I think it is for good reason that people are now demanding accountability. And if you look at it from that point of view, that's why Joshua said, fine, you want to hang the person who steals the railway guard, but we want to deal with the person who has exaggerated the cost of this thing. We expected a bullet train, but we are seeing an almost medieval-looking train coming to Syokimau.
Let's wind up on this.
Just one thing, Michelle, about the SGR and the national park. My fear is only one. When government wants to open new frontiers for land grabbing, they exactly take the steps that they have taken. Look at how Karura Forest was degraded to what it is today. They exactly took the same strategy. Look at the time when they wanted to say that they want a particular regime wanted to put up a multi-story building in Uhuru Park. The question is, at the end of the day, there is going to be coined a theory that there is a lot of conflict between human and wildlife. And for us to be safe, we have to sacrifice the warthog and the monkeys, as Harvey says, and then it opens that land for grabbing. So that's the only fear I have in terms of the SGR passing through the national park.
Right.
We'll not be able to conceal it from theft.
And of course, you know, this is the only city in the world that has a national park, you know, right in the heart of the city. And I think it raises a lot of concerns when we are very okay with sacrificing the warthogs and the monkeys in the sake of for the sake of development. But that is a conversation for another day. Let's wind up with this SGR issue very quickly. Mombasa Governor Ali Hassan Joho was barred from attending the official launch of the SGR, and he has since accused the police of enforcing illegal orders. Harvey, first of all, just listening to just what Joe had to say, he says the police were very polite with him, telling him, you know, these are orders from above and there's really nothing we can do about it. But was the presidency in order, really, to bar the Mombasa governor from attending this? And this is the second time we're seeing this happening.
I think it's high time the president and Governor Joe had a sitting. Perhaps you'll invite him maybe in Gatundu and they can eat some ribs so that they just sort out their beef. Because, I mean, if you interrogate it much deeply, you don't really perceive the reason as to why they're bickering. For heaven's sake, these are supposed to be national leaders. And I think both of them have been in parliament much earlier. They know decorum and the modicum of engagement of leaders. It's something that should not be expected out of them. I may not be able to tell who between the two of them should be the bigger man, but I think the pecking order demands that Uhuru should be the bigger man and contain this situation.
All right, Kavemba, your thoughts on this, and who really should be the bigger man, Joho or the president?
No, the constitution is clear on who is the bigger man. The question is about mannerisms, decorum. That is really the issue here. It's not even about protocol.
Maybe the question of who the bigger man is may have been the
that shouldn't arise because it is clear who the bigger. That shouldn't arise.
But you see, Michelle,
we are clear about who is the commander-in-chief. In terms of protocol.
It's not in doubt.
That's what I'm saying. So that issue of who's the bigger man,
the behavior is bringing that into a lot of doubt.
So the thing is,
the decorum.
If, for instance, I am the commander-in-chief, I'm the head of state, I invite you to my functions, and you start behaving like, you know, in ways that don't befit the kind of function that I've invited you to.
Is Kaemba trying to tell us that this was a Jubilee party? It was not a Jubilee.
Exactly. This is something also that comes up. This was a national event.
This was a national event.
That's what I'm trying to say. It's about decorum. That's what I'm trying to say. Even in family events, you might have a relative who comes drunk to your functions, and you decide, for purposes of this going on, we are going to be holding at abeyance until we finish what is important.
But Kavemba, it doesn't
that does
seem
not
to be
mean that person
you can see
that person ceases to be a family member. No, it's still
Kaemba, has there been want of decorum from the two parties? Has there been want of decorum?
Yeah, there has been. There has been public challenge.
You see, decorum is two-way traffic, the way I understand it, and I beg to be corrected. The other day we had the president pronouncing, "Kwani mimi ni bibi yako." You see, such
Joe said, "Rais ni mtu mdogo sana." Let's be objective.
So both of them have issues.
Both of them have issues, and I believe the president must rise above such kind of Joho's individuals and people like that. He should not be seen to be responding to such kind of challenges. And I want to beg and take an example from the former President Kibaki. He was a collected man, very cool. He would not respond to each and every criticism. Now, look at it this way. That is Joho in Mombasa. Governor Kingi on Madaraka Day was denied from addressing people. We had Governor Munya in Meru complaining that the system changed the venue for Madaraka Day. We had Joshua, as he's called by Harvey, in Nyeri.
Yeah, being snubbed.
He's being snubbed in present. Now, what is this saying? We are saying that the government does not want any criticism voice. They are so much allergic to criticism. They cannot even be able to hold even a positive criticism, and they have to avoid it by all means necessary. And what does that say? That continues to divide Kenyans. It does not call and rally the support that the Jubilee policy has, that of including all the Kenyans and the aspect of inclusivity.
All right, and of course, just also maintaining, we've seen a lot of calls for leaders and candidates to maintain decorum and to refrain from inciting their supporters as well. But then let's move on to another topic, and you'll get your moment, Kavemba, because we're moving on to the Madaraka Day celebrations, which also took place this week. Kenya celebrating 54 years since attaining self-rule. And again, a lot of politics surrounding the Madaraka Day celebrations. The first thing that captured the attention of Kenyans was the itinerary, so to speak, or the planning of the entire event. Many feeling that it did not feel like a national event, so to speak, but a cultural event of sorts. Kavemba, let's begin with you there.
First I have to agree that I watched that. I didn't go, but I watched it, and I honestly really felt bad about it. I have to be very honest, because you see, that was a national event and it was a state function, official. And that means the Constitution is very clear that we have a national language and we have an official language. So it follows that when we have national and official functions, then the languages that should be used are either the national ones or the official. So in as far as that is concerned, that really failed. And I am saying that as someone who's really sympathetic to Jubilee. I felt that whoever advised and whoever came up with that, even if it is a strategy, if I was in that table, I would have different.
What damage do you think that's likely to bring in terms
this
of
is what happens. Yes, you know, first we have stereotypes in this country. So that first cemented a certain stereotype. That it's not necessarily true, but it goes around. Then the other thing is that it also it was like insolence to the rest of Kenyans. You can imagine a Turkana watching the event, you know, as
we had 46
you're lost, and this is taxpayers' money. It is a national day. We're even at home, holiday. So that we follow this, then you do it in a way that we can't. It felt like it isolated Jubilee in a way that is not good, considering that we have less than 2 months to the election. That's honestly what I felt about how that was conducted, that it felt like the rest of Kenyans had been told, okay, today we are hosting this and we are doing it our way, not the Kenyan way. And I thought that really was offensive.
All right. Have your thoughts on this, the manner in which the Madaraka Day celebrations were organized, and also the choice of having Nyeri County for the first time, seeing this taken outside the capital city?
Well, you see, the Kenyan population suffers short-term memory loss, and they are likely to be very aggressive in view of the comments we may give on this issue. But anyway, news is not supposed to be good news, so we'll give them the bad news. And the bad news is this. Now, when the Jubilee administration came into power, they said, we will hold these national holidays in all the major towns or cities in Kenya. Where have they held these events? Other than Machakos, which appears to be out of their foothold, they've only held it within the areas that are highly associated to be close to them. Well, on the face of it, it may not look to be acrimonious or to invite any attention. But I think the failing we saw in Nyeri demonstrates the continued growth of absolute contempt for nationalism and the Constitution on the part of the Jubilee administration. They are now behaving like that elephant that just took in its trunk. And now it is inside somebody's heart, and all that is remaining outside is the tail. It exemplifies the magnitude of total disregard of the rest of the communities in Kenya. Look, there's nothing wrong in having entertainers from Kwale, Kajiado, Nyeri, Kakamega, or Bungoma in their traditional attire, making song and dance. That is quite appreciated. It is the diversity of the Kenyan culture. But when you see a governor mount a podium and with absolute arrogance degenerates into a tongue that nobody other than himself or a few of the individuals who will reside within that territory understand, then you see a deterioration of key national values. And you see what happened in Rwanda a few years ago was because of things like this. It is as a result of that Major General Paul Kagame banned all native tongues in Rwanda. We're not saying that we need to ban these native tongues in Kenya. They're very good. In fact, I always admire speaking some little Kikuyu or listening to Kikuyu music.
Right.
But when I'll be told the next statute will be published in Kikuyu, then or in Duluo, that would be a big problem.
Of course, it's hard to worry. So, of course, that obviously created a perception in the minds of Kenyans in terms of the Jubilee administration, especially for President Uhuru Kenyatta and Ndegwa. Now speaking about Joshua Raila Amolo Odinga and his attendance, first of all, was shocked many, especially considering that this was in Nyeri. And the last time we had a national event, he opted to have a parallel event at the Afraha Stadium in Nakuru. But then again, he was not allowed to speak, and this caused an uproar on social media. Many thinking, well, why should he have been given a chance to speak? Right now, he's a civilian like any other. Others feeling this is a man who had an active role in terms of the process of Kenya attaining self-rule, and he should have been allowed to speak. Your thoughts on that?
My thoughts is that, first of all, there was a reason why the function was held in Nyeri. One thing, the reason why it was held in Nyeri, and looking at the proximity between Nyeri and the 8th of August, you'll be able to tell that it was an epitome, or it was a strategy to kickstart the Jubilee campaigns at its vote stronghold. And of course, you can see from Nyeri, he never came back to Nairobi. He went to Nyandarua, and now he's somewhere around Nakuru or somewhere thereabouts. That was the major reason why strategically the function was to be held in Nyeri. Now, the other thing is how the function was held and where that leaves the spirit of patriotism in this country. If you remember during the days of Moi, when you were growing up, on any national day, the radios would play very, very nice patriotic music. Kenya inchi, yangu Kenya inchi. And everybody felt like this country is part and parcel of me. I would sacrifice and do anything for this country. But today, nobody plays those musics anymore. We have forgotten to remind our younger generations what patriotism is all about. We have failed to remind our younger generation where this country came from and where we need to cultivate that aspect of nationality. So now, when a national function degenerates into a Kikuyu dialect, and nobody in Mombasa can understand what was going on, you have completely cut out a big cross-section of the Kenyan society. They have no reason why they need to be Kenyans. They have no reasons why they have to be proud of patriotism. And that brings me to the issue why Raila could not be allowed to speak. Maybe because he could not speak in Kikuyu.
I think Raila can speak very fluently.
No. Let me finish.
And that brings a very interesting spin into this.
Take my satirical aspect. Take my satirical aspect.
Yes.
In the sense that people are being told, Mali, it's Kikuyu and Kales. You just keep off. It is not your party. Wait for your party. We'll do a bit of wine for you. Just keep off. That is how far it went.
Let's hear from Kavemba, because Kavemba seems to have a differing opinion.
First and foremost, I would want to come out very clear that I support the issue of holding these national events in different counties.
How does that square have this position that these things have been gone into Jubilee strongholds? What about the Bungoma person?
I would want to say this because, sometimes we want to say what favors what we are thinking.
But Machakos is a child of Jubilee.
Can I first say what I want to say?
All right, let's go ahead.
I support the idea of having these functions rotational. One of the biggest challenges as a country is nation building.
Are they rotational?
Nation building. You will say what you say after. You can counter. So that we don't degenerate. I'm avoiding degeneration. This is the route that
put his point across. All right.
Yes. It's good to get time.
You allow him to speak. We don't want you evicted, Joe.
Honestly, this is what I'm saying. That first, I support the idea of Jubilee having these ceremonies go around. Because one of the biggest challenges we have as a country is to build our nation. We still think and act like tribal nations. We are yet to start acting like the Kenyan nation.
Right.
So one of the things is that, I'm saying that because the Mashujaa Day was, by the way, Madaraka Day last year was in Nakuru. So that is where it started.
Yes.
And during that, we were told that the next Mashujaa Day will be in Machakos. Immediately after Machakos, we were told that Madaraka Day will be in Nyeri, so that he understands where it came from.
And I understand the cycle.
So it is a rotational
trend that is rotational.
And the cycle.
The second thing is this, that he has talked about political allegiances. So he also wants, for his convenience, to make Machakos a Jubilee stronghold.
When will they
Yet we know
hold
that it is called. It will get there. We are 47 counties. We've only had 3 so far functions.
We only have
so we'll
3
get
months.
there. depending on who wins, we are winning. So we'll still have 4-5 more years to do these things. So what I'm saying is, I saw what happened in Machakos. Trust me, that was a moment of pride for Machakos. Machakos hosted Kenya.
Right.
Machakos felt more Kenya than before.
And
so
it also felt like a national event.
That's what I'm telling you. I want to tell you that Nyeri messing up does not mean that the idea is bad. That's
Did Nyeri host Kenyans?
I want to know, forget what I have already said, that Nyeri messed up. So don't take us back there. No one is in denial about that. What we are saying is that one person messing up a good idea does not mean that the whole idea is bad. Nakuru hosted a national event in Nakuru. Machakos hosted a national event in Nakuru. Nyeri localized a national event. That's why we took offense.
Right.
So for as long as the issue of holding this in different counties is not what is wrong. What is wrong is localizing a national event when you get the chance to host it. So that is what was wrong with what happened. I want to talk about the issue of allowing leaders to speak.
Right.
In Machakos, the party leader of Wiper first misbehaved by coming late. You know, I watched this, and if you people remember, you will see this. Kalonzo came to the stadium when the president and the deputy were already seated. But do you know what? The deputy president still went out of his way to acknowledge his presence and even give him the mic to speak. Do you remember what he said? He spoke politics. He lacked the sense of occasion. It was Mashujade. Then he started telling Kalonzo there are people from Wiper that have joined him.
The question was, why then invite him if
That's the question. Now I am taking you to Nyeri. I am building my case. You listen to me.
All right.
So here is the first time in our history, protocol in a state function, official national function is being broken, and the former vice president gets a chance to speak. Then what does he say? He gets excited, starts doing politics, starts exciting his bloc, instead of just having a sense of occasion and being the statesman that he ought to be, and sticking to the agenda of Mashuja. Why then do you think the government did not, you know, that explains why the government had a reason to be apprehensive as to whether to give Raila a chance to speak or not. You know, they say once bitten, twice shy. If Kalonzo had used that chance well in Machakos, I believe there would be no apprehension with giving Raila a chance to speak.
All right.
Having said that, I want to say this, that I honestly think that even if he had not been given a chance to speak, the least should have been acknowledging his presence and giving him a chance to wave at the crowd. Whatever concerns there was.
That is great. Gentlemen, I want us to move away from this so we'll all have a chance to give our thoughts on this. So just moving on from what Kavemba said, there should have been at least an acknowledgement of his presence there. But we've also heard from our majority leader, Aiden Duale, saying, I mean, I was there, I was a national leader, my presence was not acknowledged. So in terms, and then we also seen Kalonzo Musyoka come out and say that was wanton disrespect of a national leader of that caliber. So in terms of even just classifying our leaders, and the respect that they should receive, do you think he should have been given a chance to speak, or at least been acknowledged?
It was paramount for purposes of national unity for government to recognize Joshua. Reason being, it brings the aspect of national cohesion. Failure to give him an opportunity to address the nation disintegrates the country and disjoins us. It's unfortunate that Duale thinks that he's a general. It's unfortunate that he thinks that his name is going to appear in the national elections as a presidential candidate. It is equally unfortunate for him to think that now, because he's a majority of, he's the leader of the majority, they are at par with Amolo Raila Odinga. It's again unfortunate for him to think that his failure to speak on such kind of national day squares out equally with Raila's. It's very unfortunate for Duale. And that is why it is unfortunate when you give people like Duale some real power that they seem to exercise. Because they, to a large extent, they exercise that power in a very responsible manner. I have just watched him today this morning saying they are going to gag the media, they are going to do wanataka kutoa the clerk of the Senate. Right. You can see the arrogance that that gentleman has been able to accommodate over a very short period of time. The guy is so much drunk of power. Duale, you wait for your time. We already know 2022 is a presidential candidate. I don't know when it's going to be. But the question is this. When he speaks like that, where does that leave the nation of Kenya as a nation in terms of cohesion? You've already seen what happened in Bungoma yesterday. Jubilee and NASA fighting. You saw when I think, he said President Uhuru Kenyatta was presenting his papers on Monday. We saw what happened. NASA fighting with the Jubilee. These guys, when they continue behaving this way, failing to give Raila an opportunity to speak, fighting with Joho, fighting with Kingi, fighting with Munya, they are beating the drums of war. They're not telling Kenyans why we need to be together and why politics ought not to divide us and why we ought not to fight out of politics. They are beating the drums of war.
And of course, we keep speaking it, but actions speak louder than words. Harvey, let me get your thoughts on this as we move on to something else. Kavemba brings in the point of what Kalonzo Musyoka did in the previous Mashujaa Day celebrations. Was that enough reason to warrant Jubilee, so to speak, from not giving Raila Odinga a chance to speak? Because why give your opponent a chance to speak when you know he's only going to speak politics, which is not in line with what you're going to preach?
Well, I think the tempo was brought much high when my colleague spoke. Let's modulate it. The problem is the entire central command of the Jubilee administration suffers that which in English we call the vehemence of Kalo youth. They have the noise of inexperience, and it's not good for leadership. Almost 80 years ago, we saw this in Germany, when there was a gentleman called Joseph Goebbels. He was the Minister of Information and Propaganda for Adolf Hitler. Goebbels could come and say every lie, every falsehood that he saw wished. And it became law because he was the Minister of Information and Propaganda. And that has come to define the current Goebbels, which is in the nature of Eden Duale. He originates every morning with a lot of noise. And I think his noise impedes communication. If anybody was to take center stage and advise President Uhuru Kenyatta, this is not the person you should send out to speak, because he speaks a lot of bile. And it's not in the realm of conjecture. This is fact. There are several communities that have decreed that Duale should not step there. The Kalenjins have said, come and campaign here. But if Duale opens his mouth, God forbid, we don't know what we'll do. He's been told the same thing in Kiambu. He's been told the same thing in Narok. Why can't somebody see? Now, back to that point. I think Raila is not a madman, for heaven's sake. And if there is any gentleman who exemplifies elderly conduct, I think it can only be Raila Amolo Odinga. And we have seen in many occasions where the nation has been in a state of catastrophe, even Uhuru Kenyatta himself has called upon Raila to come and modulate. And it's for good order. He ought to have been given an opportunity to speak. I saw him seated there so solemn with my English teacher, both of them struggling to understand what is it that these guys are talking about.
Like the rest of Kenyans.
Yes.
Yeah, and this being a national and constitutional holiday, I think whatever my colleague calls past experience of Kalonzo Musyoka or Joho should not have been equated here. And I mean, he didn't come late as Kalonzo did come late in Machako. He was there in good time. And for him to sit near Kavuludi, then protocol must have known that he will be there. For them to apportion a seat for him, they ought to have talked to him and given him an opportunity to speak.
All right. Yeah. Of course, word was already there even the day before that he would be attending this event. But let's move away from this, gentlemen, and wind up with the IEBC clearance process. So IEBC has continued to clear several candidates for the August 8th elections. And so far, we've seen several gubernatorial aspirants as well as parliamentary aspirants get cleared. And this has put IEBC on the spot, especially with regard to the integrity question. I mean, we've seen the likes of Ali Hassan Joho cleared. We've seen the likes of Miguna cleared. In Kisumu, we've seen Jack Ranguma and Anyang' Nyong'o. I mean, this considering that there's been a lot of questions even after the nomination process, especially in Nyanza strongholds, as to the integrity of how the leaders carried out their nomination process. Now, 6 governor candidates already have cases that are pending in court, and some of those 6 have already received clearance papers. Harvey, the first question would be, does IEBC have the power to recall the nomination papers issued to leaders who still have questions of integrity against them?
Now, IEBC does not have the power to do that, but I think the court has the power to annul any such certificate that has been given by IEBC, and for good reason. If between now and the date of the election, there is a determination that is made by the court in respect to a particular candidate who has been cleared, then of necessity it will mean that the IEBC has to go back on its certificate. But there's something that's quite missing in the Kenyan political culture. You see, the body that is mandated to undertake a review of ethics and anti-corruption is called, so appropriately, Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. If you were to ask this commission, what have they ever done in respect of ethics, they will not be able to tell you anything. And look, ethics is just what it is. It's social order, vices and virtues. That which you need not to be told is bad. For instance, I mean, if you are to see a senior military officer in the rank of a general sagging his trouser in Nyeri, then you know that is very unethical. You don't need to be told. A court of law doesn't need to say that. Parliament doesn't need to say that. That is why in developed democracies like India, the United States, Germany, China, and even Israel, if the people think what you've done is wrong, they don't need to take you through the legal process to find you to be unethical. I think it's a high time Kenyans needed to understand that we really don't need to elect comedians or accomplished crooks to be our leaders, because it indicates the level of deterioration in our ethic values.
Right.
So in my view, much as there may be a lacuna in the constitution or statute, the question of ethics is not one that needs to be determined by either court of law or a body so constituted by parliament. It's that which does not seem okay.
And that brings in an important point. Just before I come to you, Kakamembe, let's hear from Ndegwa and his judicial expertise, especially in terms of where we draw the threshold. Because right now we've been, like Harvey brings out a very important point in terms of ethics. It is not written down in the Constitution. There is no court of law, which will say sagging your pants is unethical. But these are issues that have been happening and nobody's talking about them. Harvey
and I are reading from the same page, that the question of ethics, the threshold should not be raised to that of a particular standard that a court of law needs to deal with. And I keep on saying that the rain started beating us in terms of Chapter 6 when we dealt with the case of President Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto. Though, of course, there was a question whether or not they are fit to run in the midst of what was awaiting them in the ICC. And of course, we can see how the court dealt with that aspect. And the court said, unless you've been convicted and found guilty, that evidence has been brought, you did ABCD, and you've been convicted and found guilty, then that's the only time that you can be barred from running.
And even as you speak about this, also just factor in the fact that as last night we had IEBC counsel Chitavi Antonym covers papers to vie for the Mombasa gubernatorial race. It's the only candidate in the gubernatorial race that we've seen being barred.
Yes.
He's not very much known to Kenyans, but does this also stamp IEBC's commitment to enforce Chapter 6 of the Constitution?
The IEBC is giving double standards. And let me just first of all finish the question of the threshold. The threshold of ethics should be that of perception, not that of a particular legal regime that has been established in court, either beyond reasonable doubt or on balance of probability. Yes, you are, yes, you are not. But on how do we look at you? Are you morally fit? Now, look at the case of Anne Waiguru.
Who's also been cleared.
Who has been cleared by the IEBC. The question of Anne Waiguru's ethical aspects, it's so much evidential in nature that evidence must be laid to prove whether or not she's associated with the 791 million. So then it is because of lack of that particular regime that should regulate on how Chapter 6 should be implemented and what are the standards and the gauges that we need to look at. Nobody can have the guts to come and say, Anne Waiguru, there's a parliamentary accounts committee report that says you are unfit to run for governor, for any political seat. The question is, what is the moral standing of that person who is giving this verdict that you're not able to run? What is the moral position of that particular person?
Right.
What is his ethical standing in the society as well? So we need to have a standardized way of looking at ethics issues in Chapter 6. And it cannot be left to a political organ like politics to return a verdict, political organ like parliament, to return a verdict that Anne Waiguru is not capable of running for a particular seat in this country because she has been associated with issues of corruption. Now, the question is, even when Gubo's commission or committee was sitting to evaluate then NYS scam, did it reach the threshold, the evidential threshold that is required so as to enter a verdict that Anne Waiguru should not run?
All right.
So we need to standardize and streamline the law in respect to Chapter 6 if Kenyans are going to yield any positive results in terms of Chapter 6, but cannot be left to people like committees in parliament, which are
to do that. All right, we'll have to stop you there because we're out of time. So let's have your closing comments, Kavemba, especially as to whether this is going to open an entirely new showdown where we have political parties and independent candidates, as well as the electoral body, you know, a big showdown in terms of seeing candidates now refer to the 2013 case of President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy having questions of integrity in the ICC, but they were still cleared to run.
Yeah, I want to state what the law says, because as for me, the problem is the Constitution. The politicians made sure that they put a clause that insulated them from most of these actions that would stop them to vie on integrity issues. Because Article 99 is very clear that, you know, it is about qualification and disqualification to vie. So they say that if you are to be stopped from vying, this is the law, Article 99, you can read it your own time in our Constitution, that if you're to be stopped to vie on matters integrity, you should have gone through the due process of law, convicted for not less than 6 months, and you should have exhausted all appeal mechanisms. That means that that matter should have gone up to the Supreme Court and the verdict, the guilty verdict upheld. Now, that has not happened. So first, don't blame the IEBC, because the IEBC has got no basis unless they can prove that as per Article 99, then you are not qualified to run. It is the same that the judges used to allow the current president and deputy to run, even when they were still at the ICC, because clearly as per that provision, they were still not guilty. They had not been convicted. That is also what is applying for everybody else. So probably we need to ask ourselves whether our legal regime to fight integrity issues is tight enough, because there's a lot of leeway. That is why some of the governor aspirants have actually been convicts. I think you know that. But still they were not stopped. Why? Because they are still in court appealing some of those things. So I think as a country, you know, first what I've been saying is that I want to agree with them that this should be about public opinion, not necessarily legislation. So that it is as, you see, that's why in countries like Japan, for instance, these people resign and actually others even go to the extremes of committing suicide because of the way the public will be looking at you. You're going to be stigmatized.
Right, public perception.
That is what I think we need to enhance. We need to raise the awareness of our people such that if anybody has been implicated, then we give a public verdict as the masses. And that is best exemplified during the election.
All right, thank you so much, gentlemen, for this conversation. And Degwanju is a High Court advocate, together with Nelson Harvey, who is also a High Court advocate, as well as Mutinda Kavemba, who is a political analyst, joining us on Weekend Express for the week that was. Many thanks for joining us in this conversation. My name is Michelle Ngele. We wind up the show now, but do stay with KTN News. I'll be back at 10 a.m. with more top stories making headlines.